Okay, so in this week's parsha, um, we're sort of introduced to Moshe. I mean, we are introduced to Moshe Rabbeinu, um, and there's several episodes where we get to sort of get to see him in action, as it were. Um, but I guess maybe one of the pivotal moments, right, is the burning bush. Um, and I'm just gonna read out. This is a sefer by Rav Shimon Schwab wrote this Perush on the on Chumash. So it sort of paraphrases the psukim. So I'll just read them out just so we have them in completeness.
Okay.
But talking about the Moshe sees the burning bush and says, "Vayomer Moshe asura na vere esamare hagadol hazeh." So, and it sounds like Moshe is probably talking to himself, but he says, "I'm gonna, I see this interesting, phenomenon. I am going to sort of detour right out of my way to see this this incredible thing. What's incredible about it? Madua lo yivar hasneh. Why isn't the bush being consumed, or why is part of the bush being consumed?" To understand what the sneh means, but in general, that's what we're talking about: something that's burning but not being consumed. So, so then it says Vayar Hashem Kisar Leros. So Hashem, observes this, that Moshe, left his path to go and to get a closer look. Vayikra Lev Elokim mitoch hasneh. So Hashem talks to him through the this bush. Vayomer Moshe Moshe Vayomer Hineni, and it says Moshe twice, and Moshe responds, "Here I am." So Hashem says, "Vayomer al tikrav halom." So Hashem says, "Don't come any closer." Shal ne'alecha mi'araglecha. Remove your shoes from your feet. Ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admas kodesh hu. Because the ground that you're standing upon is holy, and therefore that's what you need to do.
So one question. Does this concept of holiness of land apply anywhere else? We don't take off our shoes at synagogue. The Muslims do. The
Right,
Muslims take off their shoes. But
right.
where else do we have examples where we're supposed to take off our shoes for holy ground?
Yeah, good question. And I wonder, hey Ori, I do
Three
wonder.
ideas.
What's that?
Kohanim,
I was going to say that.
Oh,
Yes,
good point. Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
Right, the
But
Beis
is that
Hamikdash.
the what's the shoe halitza and
By
abelim
chalitza, right, right. That's another
and
example
abelim.
of where you take off your shoes. Part of a ceremony, right? If the woman decides, if the man decides he doesn't want to do yibum, the levirate marriage. So the brother, right? The brother, a brother dies, didn't have children, but was married, didn't have children. His brother decides, I'm not going to marry this woman. I'm not going to take on the levirate marriage. Then, yeah, you have this idea of taking out the shoe.
but it doesn't stem from holy ground. That has
No,
nothing to do with holy ground.
correct.
And the last one is abelim.
Availum, yeah. In avail when we're in availus, there's the idea of taking off your shoe, or right, not wearing a leather shoe, just like similar to Tisha B'av. But I think Uri, I think the first example is probably the closest one to what we're seeing here, which is in the Beis Hamikdash. In the Beis Hamikdash, the Kohanim operated barefoot, and that's so there seems to be that's probably the closest connection
Okay,
that we
thank you.
have.
Thank you.
Um, Okay, so let's there's a lot going on in here, and then there's a lot from Chazal that help us sort of or give us some insights into what was really happening. So I'm going to pick it up here in this piece by Rav Shimon Schwab, and he says he starts by quoting the Gemara. He says Ubizvachim Kuf Beis Amud Beis Amar Ula Bikesh Moshe Malchus V'lo Nidnu Lo Dichsiv Al Tikrav Halom. So first, the Gemara says that what was going on. Well, one of the things that was going on here was that Moshe was asking for Malchus, that kings should come out of him, as opposed to out of Yehuda, right? Out of Shevet Yehuda, which is where David Melech comes out of. But he wasn't granted this. Why? How do we know that? It says Al Tikrav Halom, don't come. When the pasuk says don't come any closer, Ve'ein Halom Elam malchus shene'amar mi anochi Hashem Elokecha Elokim v'gomer ki hevisani ad halom. So he's psukim to sort of give us this allusion to malchus, that when Hashem says to him, Al tikrav halom, what he's really telling him is, it's not he's saying not to come any closer to the bush, but there's also, he is saying that, but there's also a drush that when he's saying that, he's also saying you're not going to come closer to having the malchus. He's giving Moshe the answer, you're not getting the malchus, which is interesting. We're not, like, where does that come from, right? Where is this coming from? It doesn't seem to be indicative of that in the psukim. But Midrash Rabbah, it says Vayomer Hineni, when Moshe says, right, Hashem says, Moshe, and Moshe responds Hineni. So he says Hineni lekahuna ula malchus. So the Midrash Rabbah even adds in that he's not only asking for malchus, he's asking for the kahuna as well, that his offspring should be kohanim. That from him should come both kohanim and malachim. Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, but Hashem responds, "Al tikrav." So meaning, don't come closer to the bush. But again, that pidrush, that we can also understand that means he's not coming close. Meaning, Klomar lo yihya banecha makrivim shekavar to kenes hakuhuna la'arun achicha halam zu malucha ze malchus. Sorry, I'll just translate real quick. So Hashem says, you're not al tikrav, don't come any closer, but al pidrush means you're not going to be doing korbanos. That's what the al tikrav is.
If Moshe is asking to be the king and the Kohen Gadol, that's not terribly humble.
Right. So that's all of these are, like, we're all just sort of puzzled. Like, what is this? Well, what exactly is going on? So yeah, we're going to need to explain this a lot, because these words of Chazal are certainly puzzling. Okay. He says, Halom zu malchus k'madatema v'chuli amar le'agodesh baruch hu k'var mitukan ha-malchus le'David. Hashem responds, no, the malchus has already been given over to David through Shevet Yehuda. And Moshe is from Shevet Levi. Ad Kan. So yeah, we're left with a lot of questions. So Rav Shimon Schwab's, this is where he starts off. He says, V'chol halomed yipoleh. Right? Everyone is in wonder. Like, you read this and you just have to, like, what's going on? Eich yitachen shemoshe Rabbeinu ha'anav mikol adam. Your question, Joel, we call him the most humble man. Yavakish kahuna malchus lo lazaro. This is what he's asking for the first moment he meets Hashem. Amar mianochi, and which even stranger is that further on in the in this discourse with Hashem, I mean, we're only talking about maybe 6 psukim later, when Hashem says you're going to go to Paro. What does Moshe respond? Mianochi, who am I? Right? Because he's the Anav. So who am I? But I'm going to ask you for, like, what's this? None of this seems to stim. So how does this all fit together? Okay. So he says, V'hinei, mipshuta shel mikra, asura na ve'ere es hamara hagado hazeh, madua lo yivar hasneh. We saw this pasuk, or I read it anyway, that Moshe is sort of talking to himself, and he says, I'm going to, like, sort of sway. I'm going to leave my path. I'm going to go see what is this incredible wonder that I'm seeing, this bush that's not being consumed by this fire. So tiskarev el makom gilush ashchina. So it would appear that what he's doing is he's coming closer to it. He's getting closer to a place where the Shechina, right? However we understand what the Shechina is, but a part of God is being revealed. She'etzlo lo shayach inyan hispalus kazos memara kavod Hashem sheichol lahavi es ha'adam lebechinus kuhuna u'malchus. So he says that it's not really, like, how does that fit with, and it doesn't seem to fit, this inyan of wonder, right? This feeling of wonder that Moshe, right, putting ourselves in his place, this feeling of wonder that he has, like, what is this? What is going on? How does that fit with this idea that I'm going to try and understand and ask for the kun and the malchus? Like, how is that sort of all related to each other? It says Madregas Moshe Rabbeinu Avi Neviim he lamala me hispalos hanefesh. And when we think about who Moshe Rabbeinu was, he is the father of all prophets. Right? He's really the first of the the prophet of all prophets. So he, would be standing above this idea of hispalus and nefesh, meaning this wonderment that sort of comes from within you when you see a sight like this. Moshe Rabbeinu miskareves kiviyachar shchina etzlo v'shchina medaberes mitoch grono. Sorry, I feel like. No, this is right. Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, we're skipping something. We did. I'm sorry. I moved over to the wrong column. Okay, let me pop back up. I was thinking, how are we already at this point? My fault. Let me just pop back up to the beginning of this, and then we'll jump over to this side. I completely confused myself. So he says, "V'hinei mepshut or shomikra asura navere es amara hagado hazeh madua lo ivar hasneh." So what's going on with Moshe as he's detouring over to the sneh? It says, "Mashma shelo yada Moshe shezehi gilu shchina." At this point, Moshe doesn't realize that this is a true revelation of God Himself. V'chenis b'midrash hagadol. Given Shara v'toma al ma'isa bereshis bikesh lamod al soda shel davar adkan, and he says, and he quotes another midrash that says that what was Moshe Rabbeinu thinking when he saw the sneh, and so that he was really wondering about ma'isa bereshis, about the creation. To him, this was a natural phenomenon of creation. He wasn't thinking, wait, this is something otherworldly, right? This is something else is going on here. This is the revelation of God. No, he looked at this and thought, this is some kind of, natural phenomenon. Okay. So Moshe. So this is really, truly, an intellectual wonder. And we saw that the sneh wasn't being consumed. He just thought this is one of the wonders from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a lot of wonders, when you think about all the 7 wonders of the world, to Moshe Rabbeinu, this must have been yet another one of the wonders of the world, of creation. So it's worth, investigating it, understanding it, looking at it, observing it. But he didn't at this point realize that this was truly the Gilui Shechina. So it says, Va'amar asura na. Why is he taking this detour? Because he wants to understand this a little bit better. He wants to understand creation. To see this great wonder. He says, because that is sort of the nature of tzaddikim, that when they see something that is a wonder, they want to look at it, they want to observe it, they want to understand it, because through that you can understand, or at least get a glimpse at the sophistication of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the world that Hashem created. And he says, and he quotes he says, Ayin Rambam Perek Beis Halacha Beis Mehochos Yesodei HaTorah. And he says, and if you look at that piece, he's quoting from the Rambam in the Yad HaChazakah. In that piece, this is the famous halacha by the Rambam. The Rambam says that if you want to, develop your belief in God, what do? Just walk around in nature. Look around in nature and see all the amazing things and how Hashem has created a world and the rules of nature and everything else. That should bring you to a state of, a higher state of belief in God and appreciation, hakaras hatov, all these sort of things that we want to sort of develop in ourselves. And so what Rav Shimon Schwab is saying is that was what was going on in Moshe Rabbeinu's head at that moment. Was, I'm going to go investigate this because this is interesting. This is a wonder, and I want to understand Hashem's world a little bit better. L'chein tiknu Chazal brachos miuchedes al rucho she'ena mitzuyim v'hayamim v'anak v'kiyotzi b'zeh. And he says that, and this is also why Chazal have created these brachos that we say. We have special brachos that we say when we see certain things. When you see the great, the Yam HaGadol, the huge, a huge ocean, you make a certain bracha. I think it's also Ma'aseh Bereshis, right? When we see when we see a rainbow, when we hear thunder, when we see lightning, all of those brachos that we make, the Chachamim were mitaking those brachos because those should make us think in our minds, wow, thunder and lightning, or wow, a rainbow. All these things are Ma'aseh Hashem, right? These are all parts of the creation of from Hashem, and that should be in our mind again to help us to connect more with Hashem. So we do that through nature, and that's what he's saying, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing. They're part of nature, and we mention them as Osa, like that's the bracha, Osa Ma'aseh Bereshis, and Hashem created this. This is all part of the creation. So Hayos she mitzuyosam mora al shekocho gvroso yisbarach malei olam mi'az bris shemayim va'aretz. And he's sort of, using these quotes from different brachos to sort of make that point that all this is about. That we talk about when we hear thunder, we say shekocho ugvroso malei olam, that his strength and his might, fill up the whole world. Those are the things, those are the thoughts we should have when we're making these brachos, again, to help us when we connect with, when we see this in nature, we connect to Hashem. So this is a Kevin Shara Kodesh Baruch Hu Shasar Lero. So now that Hashem sees that Moshe is moving toward this to investigate it further, Miyad, what does Hashem do? Vayikra elav Elokim mitoch hasneh. So then God speaks to Moshe from within this sneh. Lahazira she'ein mina roish is bonin b'mara hasneh. And he's warning him not to think too much into this wonder that he's seeing in front of him, the sneh that's not burning. What Hashem is really telling him is, don't make a mistake here, Moshe. This isn't just a natural phenomenon like thunder and lightning. This is something supernatural. This is the Gilur Shechina, and you have to, sort of have a different mindset here. And that's what Hashem is telling him. Bihinei. Im haya Moshe Rabbeinu miskarav l'malkom gilur shchina haya mispal b'isbalus nefesh, and he says that if Moshe Rabbeinu had actually gotten closer to the sneh, to the point of where the Shechina is being revealed, then it would have gone from an intellectual wonderment to more of something internal to him, to his neshama, to his nefesh. So what does that mean? That when it sounds like there's a concept here that when we get closer to Hashem in terms of a revelation of God, that's something that becomes so internal to us and has such a leaves such a almost like a mark, some kind of a something that we remember, that's etched into our neshama, and that becomes something that we can give over to our children and our grandchildren. So it says v'hispalus azos tispared lebeis roshim, and this type of experience or this type of inspiration is two different things. He says echad. The first thing is sheyikne benafsho hasugula shel malchus Yisrael sheratza Kadosh Baruch Hu lidna leDavid lezaro ad ki yavo Shiloh. It has really two different things. When you talk about something that you can give over through a revelation of God, you can give over to your children. It's one thing. It's either malchus, we're talking about the kingship, v'beis bechinas kahuna. Or I should say, maybe it's the segula of it, meaning that it's some kind of a connection to Malchus, or there's a connection to the kahuna, the priesthood. But both of these things had already been given away, predetermined that they were going to go to Aharon and they were going to go to David. So Achein Moshe Rabbeinu Shahaya Ba'oser Shah Tiron. But at this moment, Moshe is still a little bit naive. He's a beginner. Mascho shelo nischanech v'lo hurgo. He's a novice. When we talk about the Nevuahs, we talk about prophecy. This is his first time. He's still a bit of a novice here. He's not really sure what's going on. And why does Rav Shimon Schwab say this? He says, I'm quoting this. This isn't my Torah. He says, Lashon HaMedrash Shmos Rabbah Parsha Gimel Aleph. That the Medrash says that this is Moshe Rabbeinu. What we're seeing is sort of like the infancy of his Nevuah. So lo yada mikol zeh, he doesn't know any of this. He doesn't realize any of this is taking place. So ve'ilu haya miskarev haya kone az benashu segulas kahuna umalchus v'nechsho lo keilu haya tovea bepeh. And if he had come closer, if Hashem hadn't warned him off and said, don't come closer, but he had come closer, then he would have then been able to acquire through that revelation, through that experience, through what it would do to his neshama, he would have then acquired the segula for the kahuna and the malchus, and it would have been considered as if he had requested them by, orally, that he had orally said, I want to have the kahuna and the malchus, even though he didn't, but just by getting close and having that experience, it would have been the same thing. And that's apparently what the Gemara that we started off with was talking about, was that is sort of alluding to this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu, had he come closer, he would have been able to get malchus and kahuna. So why, so we have to understand this a little bit more though. So Amar lo Kodesh Baruch Hu otikrav halo, but Kodesh Baruch Hu didn't want that. He said, don't come any closer. Perush. Don't come closer to this area, to this place where my Shechina is being revealed. Because Hashem is saying to him, I don't want you to come closer to this. I don't want you to end up with the kahuna and the malchus. Shemadregas Moshe Rabbeinu Avia Neviim He Lamala Mispalus Nefesh Shebe Moshe Rabbeinu Miskareves Kivyacho Shchina Etzel Shchina Medaberes Bitoch Gerono. Because he says Moshe Rabbeinu was a very special person. We never had any other Navi like him afterwards. That with Moshe Rabbeinu, it wasn't that the Shekhinah would sort of come to him in a dream or in some kind of when he was unconscious, which is how it had happened for most of the Nevi'im. But for him, Hashem spoke within his throat. Like somehow there was a very deep connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu, a very unique relationship. And veloshahu tzarich liskarev etzor shchina. It's not that Hashem. It's not like Moshe ever had to come close to the Shechina. The Shechina, as it were, sort of came to Moshe Rabbeinu and spoke within him. But when it comes to the king and it comes to the Kohen, they have to do certain actions in order to be able to come closer to the Shechina, right? The Kohen in his avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, the Melech when he goes to the Kohen and he sees the Urim V'Tumim and sees and gets can get answers to his questions that way. But all that requires something that's sort of external to them. With Moshe Rabbeinu, it was sort of happening even within him. Ukloshin Chazal, the Chazal say Hamalchus Niknis. This is in Pirkei Avos, that the kingship is acquired. That's the language that's used, is it's acquired. The kahuna niknis, and the kahuna can also be acquired, meaning that Hari Etza Moshe Rabbeinu is Gala Shechina Etzlo. But for Moshe Rabbeinu, it was already in him. It wasn't something that had to be acquired from the outside. For Moshe, it was already there. So this idea of not coming any closer is ki hamakom asher ata omed alav, because the place that you are standing on it, achshav b'li shum pa'ulas kiruv, without doing anything more, it's admas kodesh, where you already are, even though you haven't come to the place of the revelation of the Shechina, but where you are is already admas kodesh. It's already holy ground. Why? Machmas amidasecha alav lechud, because Moshe Rabbeinu was a unique person. Just because he was standing there, it was already admas kodesh. So, just to maybe sum up, and we'll try to take a look at one more piece as well, just to sort of finish out the thought. But it sounds like what Rav Shimon Schwab is saying is that there's no reason why Moshe couldn't have had the kahuna and the malchus coming from him. It sounds like it wasn't his job, it wasn't his place. That's not what Hashem wanted from him. Hashem had a very separate mission, right, in mind for Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's only because of Hashem preventing Moshe That's why the Malchus and the Kahuna doesn't come from him. But in the words of the Gemara, we see that it certainly could have, whether Moshe Rabbeinu had consciously realized this or not. Shimon Schwab wants to say that he wasn't consciously asking for it, but regardless of that, it's not what Hashem wanted, or Hashem didn't want it for him. Hashem wanted for him to be the father of all prophets, to lead Bnei Israel and teaching them Torah for 40 years. All of that was what he was supposed to do. The Kahuna and the Malchus were supposed to go to separate people. Probably further discussion to understand why that is, but that's clearly, what Rav Schwab is trying to say here. And then maybe the next few minutes, we'll just try to go on a little bit to see how this whole episode continues. And that continues into the next piece. He says, Vayomer Anochi Elokei Avicha, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So it's interesting that when Hashem introduces himself to Moshe, first he says, I'm the God of your father. And then he specifically says, the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as well. So what is that extra Elokei Avicha? Why start it out with Elokei Avicha? If he's the God of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, then he's certainly also the God of Amram, Moshe's father. So what's going on? So Rav Schwab says, Medrash Rabbah. So he quotes another Medrash. Haoda Amar, there's a pasuk in Mishlei. It says, Pesi Yamin L'chol Davar. A foolish person believes everything, at least loosely translated. That's what the pasuk of Mishlei is telling us. So what does that mean? Because that's not necessarily so profound, but what does that mean? So Mahu Pesi Nar. So the Medrash says, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about, a Pesi? A Pesi, are we talking about literally just a fool? So the Medrash says, no, a Pesi means a Nar, means a young boy. Shekain ba'arvia karein lenar Pesia. So in Arvia, I don't know where this is. Maybe it's Arabia. Not sure what this means, but the Medrash says that in this place, how would they would refer to a nar as a pesia? Why would they call a nar a pesia? Because, young children, I don't know if this is just boys, but, young children are a little bit foolish. Davar acher, ein pesi ela lashon pisui kamad tema v'chi ifate ish. Another idea of what does it mean that it's a pesi? What's another idea behind a pesi, a foolish person? A foolish person is somebody who can be easily seduced, is what he's saying. V'ki yafata ish means that when a man seduces a woman. So it could also mean that somebody who is easily, convinced, seduced, not necessarily in that connotation, but more like, in a general connotation of somebody who could be easily convinced of something. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua Cohen, Bar Nechemia Bishar Shenigla Godesh Baruch Hu Al Moshe Tiron Haya Moshe Nevuah. That the first time that Moshe has, that Hashem comes and reveals himself to Moshe, he's a novice. We saw this again, this idea before, that he when it come to Nevuah, he was a novice. Amar Godesh Baruch Hu Im Ani Negale Alav B'Kol Gadol. So if I come to him with a great voice and I can really scare him and really give him a hard time and give him trouble, so ma asa nigla alav b'kolosho aviv. So Hashem approached Moshe with the voice of Moshe's father. Amar Moshe hineni. So Moshe says, I'm here. How's my father here? Ma abba mevakesh. What does my father want? Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu, Eni Avicha, I'm not really your father, specifically your biological father, Ela Elokei Avicha, but I'm the God of your father. Adkan. So that's the Medrash. The Medrash is saying, what does it mean, Elokei Avicha? That's how Hashem approached Moshe when he was first talking to him. Why is that? Because it seems like what he's saying is Pesi Yami and the Chol Davar. So we have to understand, what is this Medrash trying to tell us? That, okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu is a novice when it comes to Nevuah. But what does it mean that Pesi Yamin L'chol Davar? So Rav Schwab says a beautiful idea. He says L'voyer Hakesher Bein Hiyosu Pesi L'schalas Nevuah B'Kol Aviv. So to understand the connection here, he says Yeshlomar Dehinei Tchunas HaPesi Hi Shehu Mitafesa B'Nokel. Again, you could be convinced easily. Lashon Pitui. The idea is that a Pesi is somebody who could be convinced easily of something. That's why we would probably translate a Pesi as sort of like a fool, because you sort of fall for things, right? You can be scammed, I suppose. V'hu patuach l'chol davar umamin l'kol. But what it really means is that you're open to everything and you'll believe anything. U'lechen korim lenar pesia, and that's why we call a nar a pesia. Shederech hatinokos l'kavel lahamin l'chol divrei avoseim imosehem. Right? Children are very much open to anything that their parents say to them. They don't require a lot of convincing. I mean, if you say something to your kids, they typically, especially as they're younger kids, they sort of take it for granted that what you say to them is true. And what Chazal are trying to teach us in this medrash is that even though in general we say it's not good to be a pesi, right? It's not good to be easily convinced of things. And a wise person, somebody who's wiser than other people, is going to really protect himself.
I have to run.
I'm sorry. We are over time. No worries. Yeah. Are you still good, or do we need to wrap it up?
Let's finish it.
We'll finish it in 2 minutes. I'm sorry. I totally lost track of it. Okay. So, right. So usually we would say that and we would say a chacham is somebody who is more guarded and is a bit more sophisticated in terms of not just believing anything that he hears, but he's going to check it out. He's going to figure out what's true and what's not. However, he says, Mikom Makom, Avodas Hashem, ma lehi la'amin davka l'kol divrei HaKadosh Baruch Hu kipesi. But when he says, when it comes to Avodas Hashem, when it comes to taking the words of Hashem, the Torah that we learn, and just believing it, whether it fits with our thinking or not, that's where it's a maila to be a pesi. That's where we should be a pesi. That's the idea. It says, "V'yisud emunas ha'adam b'Kadosh Baruch Hu maschil b'yoso tinuk u'pesi ma'amin." And that's where we start. We start off as a child, as somebody who's open and will believe anything. Sha'aza yelad mekabel es inyan ha'emunim avivimo. And that's how when we raise our children to be bale emuna, they will, because we believe it, they'll believe it. That's just the nature of a child. V'yaha'emuna pshuta zos. And from there you can build, you can add on, and you can build all of the, more of the structure of, and the, the levels of emunah when on your children as they grow up. As they continue the rest of their lives. And even Moshe, who's the father of all the prophets. Even Moshe, Rabbeinu, everything that he built upon what his father taught him when he was young, and he was open and easily convinced. And that's why Hashem speaks to him in the voice of his father, because he wants to simply continue upon that path of be open, Moshe Rabbeinu, be open to everything I'm going to tell you, because this may not fit with everything that you've seen or know or think, but this is Torah, this is Hashem. And this, he says, is the foundation for all of us to Nevuah, but also I think for Emunas Hashem, is that we have to be open, we have to allow ourselves to be easily convinced of Torah. So beautiful. That's the idea of the naivete of Moshe Rabbeinu.